In the quiet mountains of California, far from the crowded cities and noisy highways, there are stories of strange beings who stand silently and watch travelers from the ridges. These mysterious figures are known as the Dark Watchers. For hundreds of years, people who have traveled through the Santa Lucia Mountains, which stretch along the central coast of California, have claimed to see tall, dark, human-shaped shadows appearing on the cliffs or mountaintops. The figures never speak, move, or come closer. They only stand and watch. When people try to approach them, they vanish without a sound. The mystery of the Dark Watchers has fascinated and frightened many generations, and their legend has become one of California's oldest and most haunting stories. The origins of the legend go back long before California became part of the United States. The earliest people to tell these stories were the Chumash, Native Americans who lived along the coast and in the valleys of the Santa Lucia Mountains for thousands of years. The Chumash believed that the mountains were sacred places, filled with spiritual power. They told stories about large, dark spirits who lived in the high ridges and watched over humans. These beings were not seen as evil, but as watchers, silent observers who should be respected. The Chumash people avoided traveling in the mountains alone, especially at dawn or dusk, because they believed that was when the spirits appeared. Their stories described tall, shadowy figures who watched from a distance but disappeared when approached. These tales may be the first version of what later became the legend of the Dark Watchers. When Spanish explorers and settlers arrived in California in the 1700s, they began hearing similar stories from the local people. The Spanish called these mysterious mountain figures Los Vigilantes Oscuros, which means the Dark Watchers. They, too, claimed to see strange, shadowy shapes standing silently on the cliffs during their travels through the region. Some Spanish travelers even wrote about feeling an eerie sense of being observed when crossing the mountains. Over time, these stories mixed with older Chumash beliefs and became part of local folklore. When American settlers later arrived in the 1800s and 1900s, they also heard tales of the Watchers and sometimes claimed to see them themselves. The legend continued to spread, and even famous California writers helped keep it alive. The well-known author John Steinbeck mentioned the Dark Watchers in one of his short stories in his 1938 book, The Long Valley, where travelers saw dark figures watching them from the hills, only to have the figures disappear when they looked again. People who say they have seen the Dark Watchers often describe them in a similar way. They are said to be very tall, sometimes 7 to 10 feet high, with human shapes, but no clear features. They are completely dark, like shadows or silhouettes, and sometimes they appear to wear long cloaks or wide-brimmed hats. Witnesses usually see them at sunrise or sunset, when the light is low and the mountains cast long shadows. The Watchers often appear on high ridges or peaks, standing motionless and facing the valleys below. Many people who see them describe a powerful feeling of being watched, as if the figures are aware of their presence. Some people say they feel strangely calm or peaceful, while others feel a cold fear. When they try to move closer or look directly at the figures, the Watchers vanish instantly, as if they were never there. No one has ever been able to take a clear photograph or find physical evidence of these beings. Every attempt to capture them on camera has failed, with the figures disappearing before the shot could be taken. The sightings happen most often in the Santa Lucia Mountains, especially in areas near Big Sur, San Luis Obispo, and Monterey County. The region is known for its dramatic cliffs, foggy mornings, and golden sunsets. Many travelers drive along the Pacific Coast Highway or hike the narrow trails of the mountains, and some return with stories of dark shapes on the ridges. Even though no one can prove the Watchers exist, the reports continue to this day. Some modern hikers post online stories describing exactly the same kind of experience. Silent, dark, human-like figures, watching them from the distance, and then disappearing. Scientists and skeptics, however, believe there are reasonable explanations for these sightings. One of the most likely explanations is a natural optical illusion called the Brocken specter. This phenomenon happens when the sun is low in the sky, and a person's shadow is projected onto a cloud or mist in front of them. The result is a huge, ghostly figure that looks like a dark person standing in the distance. Because the figure moves when you move and disappears when the light changes, it can look like a living being. Sometimes the Brocken specter even appears surrounded by a glowing ring of light, which can make it look even more mysterious. This effect is well known among mountain climbers and pilots, and it fits many of the details in the Dark Watcher's stories. The timing, dawn or dusk, the foggy conditions, and the sudden vanishing when approached. In the Santa Lucia Mountains, where fog and sunlight are common, the Brocken specter could easily explain why so many people believe they saw tall, shadowy watchers. Another explanation comes from psychology. Humans have a natural tendency called pareidolia, which means seeing familiar shapes, especially human forms, in random objects. For example, people often see faces in clouds or figures in tree branches. When a person is hiking alone in the mountains, surrounded by silence and strange shadows, their mind can easily turn ordinary shapes into something more mysterious. Rocks, bushes, or tree trunks can look like people standing still. When light changes suddenly or fog moves, the person disappears, reinforcing the belief that it was something supernatural. In addition, hikers who are tired, dehydrated, or stressed are more likely to imagine or misinterpret what they see. The mind, when under strain, can create very realistic images. There is also a psychological reason why stories like the Dark Watchers are so powerful. Humans have always had a fear of being watched or followed in lonely places. When we are alone in nature, our senses become sharper, and we notice every sound or movement. The mountains are quiet, but they are never completely still. The wind moves the trees, animals rustle in the bushes, and the sun casts long, shifting shadows. It doesn't take much for someone to feel that something, or someone, might be there. These feelings, combined with imagination and natural illusions, can create strong experiences that feel completely real to the person who has them. Although science can explain the sightings, the legend of the Dark Watchers remains an important part of California's culture. The story has been passed down through generations and has appeared in books, poems, and local folklore collections. Artists have painted them, and ghost hunters have traveled to the Santa Lucia Mountains hoping to find proof of their existence. Some people hike into the mountains specifically looking for the Watchers, treating it as an adventure or a test of courage. Others avoid the area at dusk, out of respect or fear of what they might see. The Watchers have become part of the identity of California's Central Coast, symbols of mystery, beauty, and the unknown power of nature. Whether the Dark Watchers are real or not depends on how you define real. From a scientific point of view, there is no evidence that the Watchers are actual living beings or spirits. No one has photographed one clearly, and no physical trace has ever been found. The consistent explanations, the Brocken specter, pareidolia, and human psychology make it very likely that the Watchers are not supernatural at all. They are most likely illusions created by the play of light, fog, and imagination. However, the fact that so many people over hundreds of years have reported similar experiences suggests that something real, at least in appearance, is happening. In that sense, the Dark Watchers are real as a shared human experience, even if they are not real as physical creatures. People truly see them, even if what they see is a trick of the light. At the same time, it's important to remember that myths and legends often tell us more about human nature than about the outside world. The story of the Dark Watchers may not describe real beings, but it shows how humans react to mystery and fear. We have always told stories to explain what we don't understand. Thunder gods for storms, sea monsters for the dangers of the ocean, and watchers for the eerie feeling of being alone in the wilderness. These stories help us express emotions that are hard to explain with logic. They remind us that nature is powerful, beautiful, and sometimes frightening. In that way, the legend of the Dark Watchers connects us to the past, to the Chumash people, to the Spanish settlers, and to everyone who has ever walked alone in the mountains and felt the quiet gaze of something unseen. Even though modern science can explain the Watchers as illusions, the legend continues to live on because it speaks to something deep in the human spirit. There is a strange comfort in believing that there are still mysteries left in the world, that even in a time of technology and satellites, there are still shadows we can't fully understand. The mountains of California, with their misty ridges and glowing sunsets, create the perfect stage for such mysteries. When a hiker looks up and sees a tall, dark shape on the ridge, their heart beats faster, and for a moment, they feel part of something ancient and unknown. Whether it's a shadow, a spirit, or a trick of the light, the experience is unforgettable. In the end, the legend of the Dark Watchers is not just about ghosts or monsters. It is about how humans see the world, how we mix imagination with reality, fear with wonder. The Watchers may not be real giants standing on the ridges, but the feelings they inspire, awe, curiosity, respect for nature, are very real. They remind us that even in familiar places, mystery still exists. Perhaps that is why the story has survived for so long. The Dark Watchers stand, silent and distant, not just in the mountains of California, but also in the imagination of everyone who hears their story. They are symbols of the unknown, watching quietly from the edge of our understanding, reminding us that the world is still full of wonder and secrets waiting to be discovered.